while we're waiting, I always like to do our gratitudes. Thank you, Julia. Gratitude to you for that. First, we'd like to thank all of you that are here and for being here, because you really make this series possible. And of course, our presenters this evening, Layli Maparyan, Stephanie E., and Miss Sharon. They'll be introduced more thoroughly later in the evening, but we thank them for bringing their gifts of knowledge and understanding, wit and wisdom to this space for us. Who else? Oh, well, of course, Nason and Jillian. Without them, we wouldn't have a Zoom platform or the technical support that we need to make this series possible, good looking, and available for everyone else afterwards. So thank you so much, friends. I think right now we're going to go ahead and get started with our devotional program. And we can start out with calling in our ancestors. This is a slide for those of you that are here for the first time of our spiritual ancestors, for those of us that are members of the Baha'i faith. And we like to call upon them, and we invite you to call upon your ancestors, both spiritual as well as physical, those by blood or by spirit. This is an important thing, not only because we believe that we can intercede on behalf of those that have passed on to the next life, but also because they are also able to assist us. Some people call them angels. So we invite you to think of them. If you'd like to add their names in the chat to acknowledge them, we invite you to do that now as well. And while you're doing that, the chat will remain open during this prayer for the departed that we will play. When that prayer ends, the chat will close, and until after the presentation this afternoon. So with that, we'll go ahead and have our prayer for the departed. Thank you.
Oh my God, oh thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions. Verily, I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world. Oh my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrow, and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter water, the garden, happiness, cleanse them with the most pure water and grant them to behold thy splendors on the love to his mouth.
O my handmaiden, my leaf, render thou thanks unto the best beloved of the worlds for having attained this boundless grace at a time when the world's learned and most distinguished men have remained deprived thereof. We have designated thee a leaf, that thou mayest, like unto leaves, be stirred by the gentle wind of the will of God. Exalted be his glory, even as the leaves of the trees are stirred by onrushing winds. Yield thou thanks unto thy Lord by virtue of this brilliant utterance. Wert thou to perceive the sweetness of the title, O my handmaiden, thou wouldst find thyself detached from all mankind, devoutly engaged day and night in communion with him who is the sole desire of the world. In words of incomparable beauty, we have made fitting mention of such leaves and handmaidens as have quaffed from the living waters of heavenly grace and have kept their eyes directed towards God. Happy and blessed are they indeed. Ere long shall God reveal their station, whose loftiness no word can be fittingly express, nor any description adequately describe. Baha'u'llah Tablets of Baha'u'llah, page 254.
That we can learn what it means to really love ourselves. Then we can learn to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. That we can live in harmony, see ourselves as a family. This is my prayer for humanity. That we respect our women and protect our girls, that they feel safe in every corner of the world, that we can live in harmony, see ourselves as a family. This is my prayer for humanity. Someone by loving every boy as if it were his only son, that we can live in harmony, see ourselves as a family. This is my prayer, this is my prayer for humanity. That we know that nobody every leader knows what power is really for. That we can live in harmony, see ourselves as a family. This is our prayer. This is our prayer. This is our prayer. For humanity. These words all across the world. That every man, woman, boy, and girl will hear these words all across the world. That every man, woman, boy, and girl will hear these words all across the world. This is my prayer. This is my prayer for humanity.
To explain a little bit about how this evening will work. You know, all of our sessions aren't, cookie cutters, and we don't always do them the same way. So we're going to have the chat off. We ask you to stay on mute during the presentation. There will be time for questions and answers, after. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and she's going to introduce her two friends that she's brought with us. They'll each share some information with us and have a conversation, and then we'll go into Q&A. So let me introduce Layli Maparyan. This is her second time with us, I'm delighted to say. Welcome back, Layli. We're just thrilled to have you back.
Thank you.
And I'll tell you a little bit about her. This is from her bio. She's a doctorate, a PhD, and she's the executive director of the Wesleyan Centers for Women and professor of Africana Studies at Wesleyan College. She's best known for her scholarship in the area of womanism and is the author of two groundbreaking texts in the field of womanist studies, The Womanist Reader and The Womanist Idea. And there's a third book forthcoming, if it's not already out. She's published significantly in the areas of adolescent development, social identities, including biracial, bi-ethnic identity, and the intersections of racial, ethnic, sexual, spiritual, religious, and gender identities, such important word prints, Black LGBTQ studies, hip hop, and the history of psychology. She is definitely a scholar activist whose work interweaves threads from the social sciences and the critical disciplines and incorporates basic and applied platforms around a common theme of integrating identities and communities in peaceful, ecologically sound, and self-actualizing ways. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Layli, and it's all hers. Thank you so much for coming, Layli.
Thank you so much, Sherlyn. I appreciate you inviting me back for a second time. And I want to appreciate you for this racial healing, racial justice series that you've had ongoing for so long now, because it's such a contribution to discourse on these themes. And, when you had me here before, it was just me talking, but, when you invited me back a second time, I really wanted to widen the umbrella and invite some friends of mine who I'm often in conversation with about the topics that we're going to talk about tonight. Just as a reminder, the title or the sort of topic statement for tonight is Black Women and Spirituality, Where Healing and Justice Meet. For a long time, I've been working in the field of womanism, as you mentioned, with regard to my books, which is this sort of spiritualized social transformation praxis and set of ideas. And, lately, particularly as I've been sort of thinking about womanism and the Baha'i faith in conversation, I've been thinking a lot about Black women's spirituality as a collective resource for the body of humanity. I've been thinking about that as a broad idea that encompasses all forms of spirituality, all Black women, all of the women who are engaged in the world in that way and that particular walk. And so to that end, I want to introduce two of my friends, and then each of us will make some comments about that topic. I want to begin by introducing my friend, Stephanie Evans, and I'm actually going to put in the chat, if I'm able to, her website. I want to put, actually, Sherlyn, I'm going to send the website to you and let you push it out because it looks like I can't push it out. So
Okay.
do that so that other people can look her up. And I'm going to share a little bit of her bio, which is incredibly extensive. I'm going to pull some excerpts. But Stephanie Y. Evans, PhD, is a professor of Black Women's Studies and serves as director of the Institute of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Georgia State University. Her research interest is Black women's intellectual history, memoirs, and mental health. She's the author of 3 books, and this first one will help you see why I invited her. Most recently, her 2021 book is Black Women's Yoga History, Memoirs of Inner Peace. Before that, she also published Black Passports, Travel Memoirs as a Tool for Youth Empowerment in 2014. And in 2007, her first book was Black Women in the Ivory Tower, 1850 to 1954, an Intellectual History. She's also been a co-editor on 3 additional books, Black Women and Social Justice Education, Black Women's Mental Health, Balancing Strength and Vulnerability, and African Americans and Community Engagement in Higher Education. So I could tell you a lot more about her, but at this point, I would turn you over to her website, and I'll also let you know that we've known each other now, I think for 15 or 16 years, Stephanie. I was trying to remember when we met, and I think that it was 2005, and we had our little Thelma and Louise car ride at the University of Florida when I came down there for an interview, and we've been fast friends and intellectual supports ever since. And I can't tell you in our area of work how important it is to have your homegirls who you can talk to, you know, all the intellectual academic speak, but you can also just break it down and talk about life, you know? And so that's my relationship with Stephanie, but also that's my relationship with Sharon Saffold-Harris. And so I want to bring Sharon on the screen and share her biography as well, because I also met Sharon in 2005. You see, I met these 2 phenomenal women in the same year. That was a big year for me. I'm going to put her website in the chat as well, so that you can also check her out. And I will tell you, she launched her career, and this is how I met her. She launched her career as a motivational speaker after envisioning the life she wanted to live. She started by envisioning herself learning from celebrity motivational speaker Les Brown, and then traveling abroad to speak to audiences in hundreds and thousands of places and changing lives. And it's a good thing that Sharon had this vision, because all of her dreams have come true 10 years earlier than she anticipated. She crafted a message, I won't take no for an answer, fashioned after her turn no around, and it's on now, which is her attitude regarding rejection. So she just positive thinking, 101, 201, 301, and PhD. She's also recently a graduate of the Divinity School at Emory University, and I'll let her tell you more in time about her spiritual journeying. But she does travel nationally, internationally to speak to audiences of professionals, social thought leaders, and youths with what she calls a giant message about empowering them to create change in their own lives and communities. And she has also published books. She has 3 books: Able Giants, Rise to Live Your Giant Life, Cake and Combat Boots, Inspiring Women to Rise, and The Giant Movement, This You Are a Giant to Me. And so these are 3 books that she's written. I'm sure that there are more to come. I'm a slacker behind these 2 women because they are light years ahead of me on the books that they have published. But let me just, you know, return to the topic, because I want us all to be in conversation together, and then open it up to others to be in conversation with us about this important topic. Because, you know, a lot of times we talk about social justice, a lot of times we talk about healing, but from a womanist perspective, what's really important is to put these 2 things together. We understand that it is our responsibility to heal the world at the same time as we are bringing justice to the world, and you can't do one without the other. Anybody that's heard me talk about womanism before knows that I think about womanism as what I call a spiritualized politics, and also a spiritualized movement modality. You know, we talk about social movement, But what is spiritual movement? Spiritual movement is when we are speaking to the noble spirits of humankind, activating them, bringing people into the realization of their spiritual reality, the spiritual reality of everyone around them, and moving humanity collectively towards a society that recognizes and supports the fundamental nobility and humanity of all of us, as well as recognizes important principles of equality that are the foundation of justice. And all of this, of course, for Baha'is comes from the Baha'i point of view as expressed in the revelation of Baha'u'llah. But there are other people who also have given a lot of thought to these ideas about human nature, about social justice. You know, in the Baha'i faith, we talk a lot about the importance of bringing humankind to unity. And as I've thought about the relationship of Black women to that process, and as a womanist scholar and womanist person, I've thought so much about how in our everyday walk, Black women are constantly in a process of unifying people. And to some extent, that comes from our African worldview, in which we have concepts like Ubuntu, which is this notion of the collective and the right order, or like Ma'at, you know, these concepts that are about the unity of people and the right order governing those people or holding those communities together. So as we go through our day, we are constantly working to sustain families and communities, to elevate the well-being of individuals and collectives, whether it's in our own selves, our own families, our own neighborhoods, communities, nations, in our workplace, in the institutions of society. You know, we wake up in the morning and we begin this work of knitting people together. So when I thought about this, particularly in light of the way so many Black women are inspired by spirit to walk in the world in this way, I really thought about how Black women collectively are an engine of social transformation and of healing and justice for the world writ large. It's something that is not just true in the present moment, but there is a historical thread that we can follow. And there is also a thread across different Black cultures where there's sort of a unity of the way that Black women have done things in diverse Black communities around the world, as well as in mixed communities. And so I just wanted to put that on the table. Also, while I'm making my remarks, I wanted to pull a little bit from one of my favorite books, and I would especially want to give a shout out. I've got this book. Can you see it? Oh, you probably can't see it. I don't know how to make it show up. Lights of the Spirit, which is edited by Gwendolyn Eder-Lewis and Richard Thomas. And Gwen, I know you're here in the room with us, so I want to give a special shout out to you in this book, which is Historical Portraits of Black Baha'is in North America from 1898 to 2000. There are several chapters about Black women in the Baha'i faith and the way in which they have not only sort of enlarged the Baha'i faith, but in a way they have used the Baha'i faith as a site of change or a platform from which to engage in change. And there's a particular quote from this book that I want to share. It says, Baha'is' adherence to a principle of unity in a world characterized by disunity and their following Baha'u'llah's call to heal social ills created a social context wherein many Black women Baha'is found themselves at the very center of change. While several women were already active in the Black community and or various civil rights and women's rights groups prior to their enrollment, becoming members of the Baha'i faith merely fueled the intensity of their efforts. And I can't begin to talk about the numerous Black women, particularly in the early history of the Baha'i faith, that Gwen has so painstakingly researched and detailed in this book, but I would encourage anyone who hasn't looked at this book to turn to it for inspiration and information. In this chapter that I'm sharing from, which is chapter 3 in the book, Radiant Lights, African-American Women and the Advancement of the Baha'i Faith in the US, there's also a wonderful quote from Baha'u'llah, founder of the Baha'i faith, that I like to share because it gives us an idea of how these Black women Baha'is experienced being animated by spirit to do this healing and justice work in the world. Baha'u'llah wrote, "This is the day in which God's most excellent favors have been poured out upon men, the day in which his most mighty grace hath been infused into all created things, it is incumbent upon all the peoples of the world to reconcile their differences, and with perfect unity and peace, abide beneath the tree of his care and loving kindness. So that's just one example of the kinds of exhortations that Baha'u'llah gives throughout the corpus of his revelation that have inspired Black women and so many other people around the world to be engaged in the project of world making and be engaged in the project of healing and justice as parallel and intertwined pathways. I want to share as one last thing before I turn it over to my sister friends here, a quote from a letter from an early Black Baha'i by the name of Halle Elvira Queen, who became a Baha'i in 1912 or 1913. She was a professor at Howard University. And one of the things that she did is she taught in Puerto Rico. And she was a Baha'i when she was there. And she was given an example of what she was doing to try to both bring healing and justice, as well as spread spirituality while she was there. And as I read it, I said, this sounds just like a passage that a womanist would write. And I wanted to share it with this audience because it really demonstrates how for many, so many Black women, the work of healing and justice is a daily walk. It is not abstract. It's not something you do just one day a week. It's not something you just do when you show up to a march. It is how you wake up in the morning. So let me just share what she said. She wrote in her letter, I formed a welfare society in my class. That's the class she was teaching in Puerto Rico. At Christmas time, we found the names of all the needy and deserving women of our city and took them baskets of fruit and clothing. At the same time of the recent flood in Ohio, we collected $42, which we sent to the sufferers and for which we were personally thanked by the acting governor of Puerto Rico. We held weekly discussions on the beauty of universal peace and the horrors of war. An essay on the life of Qurratul Ain, which was an important early Baha'i woman, was sent by one of my pupils to the Insular Fair and received a first prize. I sent out Baha'i literature to American friends. I myself learned how not to be afraid of life. So can you just feel the spirit of this woman waking up in the morning, trying to figure out ways to bring healing and justice through herself and the people who are in her immediate environment, her classroom, the people in the countries and cities where she's lived or has connections, and also growing within herself spiritually, emotionally, socially, and otherwise. So I'm just going to end there because I think that's a platform for opening up the topic. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to make a few remarks. And then Stephanie, you can pitch it over to Sharon, and then we'll have a conversation with each other.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Oh, wonderful. It is such a blessing to be here. I am grateful to Layli for this invite and to be able to share this space, this fireside chat in the middle of summer. I'll start by just talking about the origin of my interest in Black women's studies. In that I was born in Washington, D.C., and I'm an Air Force brat. And so I moved to 5 different places before I was a teenager. I was born in D.C., moved to Albuquerque, then California, then Germany, and Arizona, all before I was a teenager. So because I moved around so much, books became my best friends. And so I was always, had my head in a book and was learning a lot about the world because I had the advantage to travel. But it wasn't until I started college, and I didn't start college until I was 25, that I actually was assigned a book by a Black woman. And so, everything that I do in my research is Black women, blackity black, 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 extra blackity black, because I was so excited to learn about the history of Black women's ideas that I was never presented with in any of the contexts. And so, when I first started, I started at St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico, when we read the great books, which were, Greek, Homer, and about Greek civilization. So Homer and Aeschylus and Euclidean math and the classics, which were wonderful. But again, there was an absence of the ideas of Black women. And so once I started reading about Black women, and particularly life writing and memoirs, it became such a passion because if Plato can be seen, Plato and Socrates and Homer and Aeschylus can be seen as universal, then I was really interested in bringing some life stories of Black women to bear on how we understand humanity. And so all of my my work is about Black women, not to the exclusion of others, but to center for young girls like myself who didn't have exposure to anything other than kind of the broad general Black history or Black women's history and what we did, but not necessarily what we thought. So I got into life writing and mental health in particular because I'm a survivor of several different types of violence. And so when I think about spirituality and what my work, you know, my learning journey in this work, I gave a presentation once called Loving All the Voices Inside My Head, because for years I just consumed almost obsessively. You know, I collected a library of over 500 Black women's narratives from around the world, from Africa, from Australia, all over Europe, and definitely the Americas and the Caribbean and the United States. And it just gave me a sense of clarity in that my connection, as you began this, you know, this session, is to the ancestors and to the departed. And I feel like, in the words of Maya Angelou, that Black women's life writing is letters to our daughters. And so I am the intellectual daughter of all of these narratives, and they're inside my head. Whenever there's a doubt, whenever there is fear and anxiety, and I actually, the first year I started college, I had an ulcer because I was so anxious. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know a lot. And so the calming effect of these women's voices who come from so many different faith traditions. So you have, you know, definitely the Baha'i faith, but when you read historically across cultures, you really get a sense of the unity of humankind and all of these spiritualities that I think Baha'i represents. So, so I've been loving all the voices inside my head. So this recent book that I'll just kind of give you a quick glimpse of in terms of what it means for healing and justice, I began to be drawn to the topic of inner peace. And so this new book, and I think you can see here, if it's not blurry, this new book is called Black Women's Yoga History, Memoirs of Inner Peace. And it traces 6 Black women elders, Harriet Jacobs, the Delaney sisters, Eartha Kitt, Rosa Parks, Jan Willis, and Tina Turner, all who wrote about meditation and yoga in their memoirs. And so initially I was just doing healing and self-care narratives. And then I ran across a picture of Rosa Parks doing yoga. And it was like, wait, what? Excuse me, what? The Miss Rosa Parks is doing yoga. And so if you just do a basic search on the internet for Rosa Parks and yoga, you'll see this work. But it's not just about the physical practice, it's what these women's narratives represent. And some, like the Delaney sisters, didn't start doing yoga until they were in their 60s. They lived to be 109 and 104. And their narratives really helped guide me to understand how to manage stress. And as Layli writes in her book, you know, if you change yourself, you change the world. And so I'll just leave you with these kind of ideas, right? Black women's ideas of what inner peace means from these 6 perspectives. Harriet Jacobs, who was born enslaved, wrote about meditation in her 1861 book. And she wrote that she intended to secure peace in this lifetime. She talked about walking meditation when she was walking to and from the plantation where she was and to the place where her children were kept, 6 miles away each way. And she was plotting the entire way to make her escape and to secure her children's freedom, and not to have peace in some other world, but peace in this lifetime. The Delaney sisters envisioned peace in terms of home and creating a home. They started doing yoga because their mother, who was 80, started to bend over, and they said, you know, we needed to do yoga to stretch, you know, these exercises to stretch out mama. And so they envisioned peace in terms of creating home. Eartha Kitt, who was a international phenom, talked about finding peace in nature, and that when she was stressed out, she would walk outside and she had this bird bath. And actually her resting place is a bird bath because she used to go out and talk to the birds. Rosa Parks talked about peace in terms of social peace and harmony. Jan Willis, who is a religious studies professor at Agnes Scott here in Atlanta, Georgia, and her book is called Black, Baptist, and Buddhist. And she talks about choosing peace over violence. And lastly, Tina Turner talks about, you know, in her chanting work, the move from pain to peace. So being a survivor of domestic violence, that these are different ways that I've found in yoga and meditation narratives of women over time, help me understand what it means in my work as an academic and as a department chair for the last 12 years, how important it is to center myself, to have compassion for myself, so that I can bring that to every aspect of my work. And so I'll stop there and turn it over to Sharon.
Thank you, my beautiful sister. Hi, everybody. I am Sharon Saffold-Harris. Delighted to be invited to be with my two scholar activist sisters for this fireside chat. Thank you, Layli, for the invitation. Thank you, Charlene, for inviting Layli. And thank you, Stephanie, for sharing this platform with me as well. I would first like to acknowledge some of my family that is here, because it is their spirit that is, in addition to yours, that is adding to the fire that you see. And so I want to first acknowledge my daughters, Ariana Saffold and Shahana Saffold. Hallelujah. I'm a proud mother of 6 beautiful daughters, 2 of which are here right now. And then I want to acknowledge my sister, my sisterhood, Astria Wilson, who, hallelujah, helps me run on to see what the egg gonna be. And if I've forgotten anyone who has also joined, when I see you, I'm gonna speak. So now I am going to ground my introduction in a little bit of who I am, and then I too am going to read a brief insert from a text that I'm currently just thoroughly enjoying, in hopes that you will come along with us on this journey of Black joy. As Layli said, I'm a motivational speaker. It's in my bones. I can't do nothing about it, even if I wanted to. So I was born in the Nation of Islam. So I came into this world Islamic, but before 14. And so if I happen to call, if you're comfortable, and I happen to call any of the people under the sound of my voice, if I happen to call a religion that you have studied or study under, and you want to identify, raise your hand. I'd love to see you. So born in the Nation of Islam, and then before 14, I was Jehovah's Witness. If I have any Jehovah's Witnesses in here. I was Seventh-day Adventist, if I have any Seventh-day Adventists in here. I was Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if I have any Mormons in here. So yeah, by the time I was 14, I had practiced various religions. Needless to say, I also went to 11 elementary schools and 5 high schools. So therefore, the ability to cultivate joy was necessary. It was a necessary tool of survival. Currently, I have landed in Christianity. I landed in Christianity by way of a call. Many Christians have call narratives. Every call narrative is different. As a Christian, we do not challenge others. At least I do not practice challenging others' call narrative, but I'm so happy to tell you about mine. I was called into Christianity because I love dearly every single religion. I'm a religious studies major, Spelman College. Hallelujah. If there's any Spelmanites here, I know my sister Layli is one. I held you up, my sister. Religious studies, where I studied Eastern religious traditions and Islam. And then, as Layli said in the introduction, a 2021 graduate of Emory School of Theology, where I studied Christianity. So what I want you to do is just envision all of those religions, 11 elementary schools, 5 high schools, and 40 moves. I've moved 40 times and I'm 47 years old, 40 times. So I have had to create space often in many places, which has given me the ability to cultivate joy and love because it is necessary for me to survive. I operate better when I'm happy. You don't want to see me no other way, trust me. So with that said, I'm going to read to you what I'm currently reading. And I want you to kind of think about that from the perspective of the writer, also the persons who are unnamed, i.e. Black women, but also as yourself as the hearer. This book is called, and I'm doing my best to joy my freedom. Let me tell you a little bit why it's called To Joy My Freedom. Because it was actually the words of a formerly enslaved Black woman in, I'll tell you her, 1866. Her name is Julia Tilleroy. And after being freed and standing in the line at the Freedmen's Bureau, a non-Black sister asked her, after looking outside and seeing all of the disarray and all of the hunger and all of the famine and poverty that formerly enslaved, my formerly enslaved ancestors were experiencing, having just been released from their enslavement, when she stood in line and she got to the sister, the non-Black sister that was helping her, she said, why would you ever want to be free? Look at what you're going through. Why would you want this? Assuming that somebody who wrote that Black folk was happy about slavery and we was working fine on the master's plantation was right. I'm assuming that's what made her ask that question. But that old beautiful woman responded, to joy my freedom. Did y'all get that? Let me do it again for you. Can you imagine the mother? Look at the woman who said, why folk come you want to be free? And she said, to enjoy my freedom. Now we would say it today, to enjoy my freedom. But I sure like the way that mama said it. She said, to enjoy my freedom. So that's where the title came from. But let me read to you about where we came from. And we is all Black women, womanists, feminists, Black feminists, definitely my sister Layli and Stephanie. Let me read a little something to you about that. Now, remember, I told y'all my mother is sick, so family is important to me. But remember, I told y'all 11 elementary schools and 5 high schools. I got plenty of mothers as a foster child, and that's not a bad thing. That gives me a narrative that's colorful and beautiful. So let me read to you something about us. Not all missionaries were insensitive, as Craighead is a character, a true character, that others like Frederick Ayers, who fully appreciated the significance of family to ex-slaves. The idea of freedom, of independence, of calling their wives and their children and their little huts their own property. I'm adding that emphasis mine. Calling them their own was a soul animating one that buoyed up their spirits. He observed it. He also inspired strong hope. He said it also inspired strong hopes and influenced them to persist efforts in self-preservation and in human elevation, he continued. At the sight of several families sharing the same abode together, remember they were huts now, several families sharing the same abode, another missionary in Augusta similarly took note. And she said, I quote, "Some were bound together by no ties, no kindred," end quote. As people historically deprived of fundamental knowledge of blood relatives, slavery, as well as freedom, produce the conditions that tested their principles daily. Broad understandings of kinship encouraged Black women to assume responsibility for needy children other than their natural offspring. Silvery, for example, could hardly survive on the minimal substances she earned. Yet she extended compassion to the youngsters lost or deserted by other ex-slaves. She was hard, this is a quote, "She was hard put to it to work for all of them," observed her former owner. Emma Prescott said, but, quote, "Of course, as our means was all limited, we could not supply her enough to feed them. Her life was anything but ease, and it was a pitiful sight." She called that Black woman pitiful and called her life uneasy. She said anything but ease, but I'm here to say, I am here to stand in the presence of the ancestor whom I did not know and say that Black women, as a tool of survival, have always made sure, regardless of race, class, gender, color, religion, differences, we have always made sure that we help everybody enjoy their freedom. Back to my sister Layli. Let us chat.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate particularly how both of you dug into the well of your personal stories to give context to the theme that we're talking about today, but also shared from the lives of other Black women, both past and present or near present, who exemplify the very thing that we're talking about. And, you know, part of what I'm asking our audience to do today is to really think about not just individual Black women and individual Black women's lives, whether past or present, whether people you know personally, whether it is yourself or whether it is others in your family or neighbors or whosoever, but to think about, again, Black women's spirituality as a collective resource for the body of humanity. The very kind of actions that were outlined in my two friends' narratives, whether it's searching for, finding, and establishing practices for inner peace, which are so important to our ability to do our work in the world and to bring peace to others, to bring justice, to bring healing, or whether it was the stories that Sharon was sharing about people extending themselves, taking care of others, and doing what a lot of Black women call making a way out of no way. There is no way to make a way out of no way unless you have spirituality fueling you. You know, unless you have access to the invisible infinite, you really cannot make a way out of no way. But we hear those stories, and Black women of all faiths and no faith are still doing that today on behalf of humanity. And what I think about often, particularly as a womanist, as a womanist, we like to focus on the people who are less seen often. Like Stephanie, that's one of the things I really appreciate about your book. Some of them are big names in there, and some of them are people that probably you are bringing to others for the first time. In your collection of 500 memoirs, there's names in there that most people haven't heard of, but you're putting the stamp of worth and value on every one of those stories, and you're pulling out the gems for the rest of us to learn from. That's an important process because it's asking the question, what can the world learn from Black women's narratives? Not just what can Black women learn from other Black women, but what can the entire world learn from Black women? What does the entire world need for its healing? And that's sort of the essence of womanism. I say womanism is not just, by Black women, for Black women. It's from Black women to the world. It's for everybody. It is, our ideas about how to bring healing and justice, how to remake the world, how to do social transformation. And as Sharon's stories particularly highlighted, we do this arm in arm with others in our community, whether it's children. You know, you said something about, I think someone was actually quoting my book, if you change yourself, you change the world. Well, you know what? If you change children, you change the world too. Who changes children? The people who work with children, who walk with children, who think about children's minds and hearts and spirits and are trying to form them every action of every day. You know, Black women historically have been very family oriented, and that comes out of not necessarily an essential quality of us as women, but it comes out of, again, that Ubuntu concept of the collective, of we are all born intertwined. Is not something that we create after time. We are born intertwined. And how do we maintain, sustain, build, grow, and strengthen those connections? Obviously, there's a lot of work to do. For example, Stephanie, you referenced violence. Violence is all the ways we break that fabric. You know, that's all the ways that we disconnect, unconnect, you know, take out the emotional or physical scissors and cut those bonds, you know. But once those bonds have been cut, how do we sew them back together, and who does that work? You know, often it is Black women, and we have to do that not just for the communities, but within ourselves, for ourselves as well. And often spirituality is a big part of how we knit ourselves back together. So I could keep talking, but I want to open up an opportunity for the audience to maybe ask some questions. I have questions that I could easily ask Stephanie and Sharon myself, and I'll do that if need be. But knowing that we will be wrapping up around 9 o'clock, I want to make sure that I offer time for people in the audience to make commentary. And just one question I might even ask to the audience for you to think about is, you know, in what ways do you see that Black women bring a unique lens to problem solving for humanity? You know, and in what ways do we need to enlarge that so that people don't experience what Stephanie experienced at the beginning of her education, which there's no books, no texts, no ideas emanating from Black women in the process of education. So let's open it up, Sherlyn, now that you're back to moderate.
Okay, great. Thank you, ladies. Wow. I would like to have each of you back again. Hear so much more about your lives, your stories, your contributions. Layli, thank you for bringing such deep wells of joy and spirit and information to our space. And again, thank you, ladies, both so much. So as Layli said, the ladies are going to have to leave around 9 o'clock. That's about, well, 7:30, that's about a half hour or so. So we're going to ask if you could keep your comments or questions, you know, rather terse, so people have an opportunity to engage. If you would, if you'd use the participant hand, go to that little reaction smiley emoji in the lower right-hand corner on your screen so you can raise your hand, and we will go from there. I think friends need a moment too to digest and ingest a lot of this wisdom and perspective that you've all given us here. The chat is, we're still keeping that closed because we would like people to stay focused in the room. And while you're formulating your thoughts and your ideas for our presenters, let me just also add, if you'd like to subscribe to the series to be notified when this presentation is on our YouTube channel and such, please send me your email address and name in your city and state, and you will go on to our subscriber list. And we'd love to have you on there if you're not there already. We keep our emails to a minimum, so you won't be bombarded with things, but you will know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and when it's available to catch it on YouTube. So Miss Carlotta, please, Miss Carlotta, welcome, and go ahead, take yourself off mute. Thank you.
My question is, you know, given that we're talking about Black women and spirituality, I am struggling in, you know, going from Christianity, believing that all of the religions, scriptures had the same message. I can't find women. I can't find a message to women. I'm challenged by he all the time in every scenario. And, you know, when you talk about how women think, that was really profound for me, that we don't know our thoughts. I have at least 5 decades of journals. I've been keeping a journal since I was born. And I write my thoughts in it. And I'm just wondering about fiction and nonfiction, but I'm wondering about, the Holy Scriptures of all the religions. I mean, I have searched a number of religions and studied them all, and I'm now a Baha'i, a Christian. Islam is just the servant of God, so I'm Muslim because I've read the Quran many times, and I embrace, the Torah segment and the whole thing. So can you just speak to that issue of the female thoughts in spiritual scriptures?
I just want to make one preliminary comment, Carlotta, because one of the things that I discovered in the course of my own spiritual study, particularly working with teachers who were well-versed in some of the original languages of different texts, that some languages actually have pronouns that are not gendered, but they can't be translated into English that way because English doesn't have any non-gendered pronouns. So sometimes there are ideas where the scripture or the revealed word is saying people in general, but because of the conventions of English, particularly during the times when it was translated, because we didn't think of non-gendered language until really the 70s to now, that it was often translated as the universal he. And now we can look at that and we can say that's gendered, male gendered language. It makes women feel sidelined. But in some scriptures and in some languages, there's no gender. So we have to pause and ask ourselves, what has the English language done to try to put a sexist lens on some of the world's sacred scriptures? Now, that's not to say that there aren't some things in scripture which are specifically referring to men, or where the men are not the revealers of the word and so on. And I think the question you raise is a great one. It's one of the things I love to hear, that you have all these journals. It makes me hope you're going to write a memoir. Maybe you'll have a book for Stephanie's shelf before too long, because we find that so much of what we know about women's spirituality is in women's writing. So, I think that that's an important point, but I don't know if either Sharon or Stephanie, if y'all want to weigh in on that question.
Okay, I do want to weigh in on that question because I had the same question. So I am so glad to know that I have found my sister. I had that question, but that question was answered at Spelman when I was introduced to Dolores Williams, Sisters in the Wilderness. And she goes through the Bible and she pulls out the voices in the Bible that were either unnamed or that were given, as Layli said, a gendered lens that was not a female identity. And so I do want to say that one thing that I learned when I embarked upon divinity studies, as well as at Spelman, is that the Bible, believe it or not, is written by women and men. The Bible is a collection of stories that are pieced together. There are some, the New Testament is going, it's mostly letters, but the Old Testament is a collection of different narratives that were woven together. And so some women, some men that were woven together into a cohesive story. So not all books of the Bible were written exactly the way you read it. But one thing I want to encourage you about is that I don't know if you know that a woman of color was the first person to name God. I don't know if you do that, but yeah, when Hagar was sent into the wilderness, and you'll find this in Dolores Williams' Sister in the Wilderness as well. When Hagar was sent into the wilderness, her with her new son from Abraham, she is the first to name God. She said, "You're the God who sees me." And so I want you to know that women are present. It's just what is pronounced from the pulpit and who's doing the pronouncing. And so oftentimes we read from the lens that was given to us, but if you bracket that lens, you'll find that we're speaking. So, and I welcome you to consider that. I'll yield to my sister, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you so much. So I think this is a really interesting discussion about spirituality, because I consider myself undeclared, like a major. In college, it was like, well, am I English? Am I history? Am I anthropology? I'm undeclared. I'm still learning. But I think this is where having such a breadth of narratives is helpful. The first thing I thought about was there's a book called Demonizing the Queen of Sheba. And it talks about Makeda, who's also known as the Queen of Sheba, and the different takes on the queen who went to test Solomon on his knowledge. And the process of in Christianity, in Islam, in the Kebra Nagast, which is the holy book of Ethiopia, the king, the king of kings in Ethiopia, that traces the lineage down from Ethiopia to Haile Selassie. So there is just within that one case of a telling of one woman who's in the Bible, who's in the Talmud, who's in the Quran, who's in the Kebra Nagast, how the process of changing a woman's role and significance in history evolved. So that's just one case. In terms of Christianity, there's and language and those who have been called, let's say in the Christian tradition, there's a great book called Sisters of the Spirit, which talks about Jarena Lee and several Black women who in the 1800s were called to speak their own truth as religious leaders. There's Rebecca Cox. There's a lot of that. But in the Black Women's Yoga book, talking about spirituality, I found 11 different religions. There's the Baha'i faith, which of course I cite Layli. Buddhism. There's Bell Hooks, Jan Willis, Angel Kyoto Williams. Several Christians, including Maya Angelou, who, when someone says, I'm a Christian, she says, already? Candomblé, Lorelei Williams, Humanism, Alice Walker, Islam, Ilyasa Shabazz, Judaism, Ahuva Gray, Rastafari, Rita Marley, Ubanda, Benedita da Silva, Voodoo, Catherine Dunham, and Yoruba, Carolyn Boyce Davies. These are women who from all these different traditions write in their own voice with their own questions, asking just what you've asked about what is the role of women in this spiritual world. So there's a lot to be gained by just seeking and asking those questions from all of this rich historical writing.
And I would like, thank you, Stephanie. I would like to add to that, or just elaborate briefly on, how connected this is to the Baha'i principle of the independent investigation of truth, and the notion that in this day and age, that humanity has, men, women, people of all genders have reached a level of maturity where doing our own spiritual exploration is important. And one of the things that womanists talk about is the importance of the personal spiritual journey, and the fact that in that quest for truth, we often study or sample or try out or belong to different faith traditions, different wisdom traditions, different initiatic traditions, different meditation traditions, etc. And in the end, it all blends together in terms of our spiritual understanding. And it also blends together in terms of the ethics that we bring into the world and the kinds of actions that we bring in our contributions to social transformation. So rather than this kind of narrative that the world sometimes gives that it's bad to explore spiritually, the womanist and the more Black woman's perspective is it's good to explore spiritually. It's good to learn as much as you can about different faiths and religions. It's good to bring it all together and to keep ever enlarging and informing your spiritual walk in the world.
Nikki sent me a message in chat that she'd like to make a comment. Nikki, can you show us yourself so we can spotlight you here with the ladies?
Dark background. My name is Nikki Nesbeth, and I'm the director of the Boston Girls Empowerment Network. But we also have a Black women's gathering circle in the city of Boston called Kinte Tent. And it's just a gathering space where we connect monthly to discuss Afrofeminism, healing, different healing modalities that are Afro-rooted. And I'm actually Jamaican, and I come from, my father's a Rastafarian. So just kind of hearing you kind of mention that earlier, I'm connected to my ancestral history, right? So in Jamaica, I come from a religion. My ancestral religion is Kumina. Kumina. And Kumina is our ancestral religion from Ghana. and it had a female priesthood. And the center of Kumina was actually healing, feminine healing. And these were the women who created the healing spaces. So we had spaces in our ancestral religion called balm yards, BALM, a place where you would go for healing. And also, even during slavery, these Black women would have spaces, healing gardens, where they would have pain trees, where you would go and you'd find the pain tree. So if their children died or was sold or, you know, experienced some kind of brutality as punishment under slavery, they would have places in the wilderness and there would be trees with nails all over it. And that's how women would know what the pain tree was. Or they would have pain gardens or pain lakes where you would go to recover. So healing was always a central part of our West African heritage because it centered women, and everyone recognized the women as kind of the organic indigenous healers, and men and women went to those women for healing. So, you know, I submit that the contribution that Black women make is that they have always centered healing as the major component of life. Everything else happened around having a healing space. You gave birth, you drove commerce, you did whatever it is, agricultural work. But at the center, they realized nothing could happen, and nothing could happen successfully unless you had a healing space where people could go at the end of whatever else they did. So, I just want to say that. So in the city of Boston, through our Kinte Tent Healing Project, we carry that forward by having a healing space. And I have a lot of young mystics that are a part of our network. And as you know, that's another lens to Black femalehood, right? All the sighted ones, and I'm sure half of the Black women on this call are sighted, as is so common for us that most people don't know about us, right? All of those with the dreams and the visions, and you could read spirits and energy and, the premonitions and so forth. We had a meeting about that called Mystic and Healer, and I'm telling you, you could almost touch the atmosphere in the meeting. But, essentially that's a big part of us, and that's why we were seen as being well suited, because we were said to be those who walk between the heavens and the earth, right? We were the royal Akasha, which is the space between the heaven and the earth. Black women are seen as the organic healers who could move between the physical realm and the spiritual realm on behalf of themselves, their families, and their communities. So, that's just wanted to contribute, and that's the energy that they bring. And this is something that we not just kind of use for ourselves, but we share that with our communities, and we share that with those who are around us. So even when I have friends who are white and other friends, they will call me and say, Nikki, I'm doing so-and-so. Did you see anything? Did you have a vision? Do you see anything? So, it's kind of a universal understanding that our gift is to be shared for the betterment of all. Thank you so much.
And if I may, I think that's so incredibly important. And as you're speaking, I think for me, it's incredibly important to acknowledge kind of the qualifiers of what we're saying about Black women, because we know Black girls magic. We are, we know that, right? I think what's interesting for me at this historical moment is to observe the number of Black women who are saying no, because I think that too is, even though we are communal healers, we're communal people, we are portals to, from the universe to this realm and back, and have so much to give. I am touched by people like Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams, who are like, nope, not doing it. People who are quitting, people who are stopping, and in the name of not being used up endlessly at this moment. One of my favorite Twitter feeds is the nap ministry. There's a woman who's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm bringing back naps. How about that? That's my ministry, is we gonna take a nap because Black women are tired of saving everybody, and I ain't doing it. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge, like, conversations like this demystify Black women, even to ourselves, that we are everything and we are absolutely human. And we are not, we are magical, but we need a nap. And what type of radical statement it is for, as Billie Avery, she's a public health activist, Billie Avery, like the radical act of, no is a complete sentence, just saying no. And so having these historic and communal and cultural gifts, but also having discernment of when to say nope, and how we I'm observing at this moment are doing that out of necessity, because there's so much foolishness up and down what's going on in the news.
Stephanie, I'll just connect that to womanism through one of our ancestral mothers, who would call what you are saying that nap and that no. Our ancestral mother, Katie Cannon, called it doing what our soul must have.
Yeah. And I want to say thank you to Nikki for everything that you said, because all of those modalities and powers that you mentioned are part of why Black women are really the answer to a lot of things that need fixing in the world, and because of how, we have been put through it historically, and even today are still being talked out of our own true selves, by everything around us. So many people don't even know about the things that you just spoke of. I mean, I'm in Boston. I never heard of what you were just talking about, but I'm glad to hear about the Kente tent. I'm glad to hear about, the practices that you're keeping alive with that work and the way you're convening people, because whether people know about it or not, that is where the transformative healing work that connects us to justice takes place. And also, just with regard to, the sort of no is a complete sentence concept, no is part of the language of justice. No is what makes exploitation stop. No is what makes, all sorts of violence stop. I mean, no is a stop. It is something that puts things back in order. It is one of the things that creates order in the world. And so, we have to think differently, particularly in terms of women's no's, because women's no's are often in response to violence and exploitation. And that makes us take a deeper look at what's really going on that we need to change.
I want to second that emotion and say, Nikki, that presentation was thebomb.com. So thank you. And I was smiling and cheering you on because I live in what you say. We are so much. I'm thankful for the ability to be so much. But that nap that my sister Stephanie talked about be necessary sometimes. And the no as a tool for justice, as Layli said. But I do want to ask you, Ms. Nikki, I have a daughter that's at BU, and I would love to introduce her to that group. So if you don't mind sending that to Sherilyn, and Sherilyn, if you don't mind sharing that with us, I'm interested in hearing more. The other thing that I wanted to say, this is for the other participants. I wanted to bring race into the conversation, non-Black, if that's okay, by sharing a story with my neighbor that I had. I have a neighbor that is that identifies as a white woman, and we've been very dear friends. We love each other for real, for 15 years. And so one day I showed her a video of my brother who was experiencing police brutality, and it was recorded. And when she saw the video, she began to cover her eyes and ears, and she couldn't continue watching. She said, I can't see no more, I can't see no more, I can't see no more. Because until then, she didn't know anybody that police brutality directly impacted, right? And she loves me, and although she doesn't know my brother, her love for me considered my brother. And so she did not want to see my brother brutalized. And so she said, I didn't think stuff like that really happened all the time. And so I had a very brief conversation with her. And this is a conversation I'm asking each of you to have with yourselves, which is why I'm sharing this story. I said, what do you mean you didn't understand that this happens? And so I asked her, have you ever seen, and I began to name movies that share the Black experience outside of the roots, the older movies. And I began to name 12 Years a Slave and other movies. And she said, no, I've never saw them. And so I said, well, what movie have you saw that centers the experience of the formerly enslaved and of Black people. And she said, I can't watch stuff like that. And when she did that, she raised her hand and I can't watch stuff like that. I can't watch stuff. I'm an empath. And you don't understand. If I watch stuff like that, I won't be able to go to sleep. I can't even hear. Please stop talking about, please stop talking about, I can't hear it. And I listened to her and I sat with that. And in the spirit, I said, what do I do? Because I love her and she's a friend, but she could not hear about what I, as a Black woman and my Black brother experienced. And so I said to her, do you watch? And I began to name movies about, I don't know, she said, blood and gruesome and beating, it just keeps me up and I feel it. And it takes my spirit. So I can't watch stuff like that. I forgot to add that because it's important to the next thing. So I said, do you watch movies like Saving Private Ryan? Have you ever seen that before? Oh, yeah. And I named other movies where America was at war, soldiers were at war. They were very bloody and gory, but America emerged victorious. And she saw, yeah. I said, oh, that's bloody. That's gruesome. It just has America as victorious. And she looked at me and she goes, I'm pouting because you're right. And so what I had helped her identify is that she wasn't interested in the narrative of what some of her ancestors inflicted on mine. She was interested in the narrative of her ancestors being constantly victorious, but not in the narrative of torture. And so I'm going to ask the people who are listening, how many of you have watched those type of movies on your own because you really desire to understand? How many of you have read books? To Joy My Freedom is a good book. On your own to understand the lived experience from a lens that is academic and from a lens that is correct and from a lens that has brought more of the 21st century's lens other than like Roots and other things. Color Purple was phenomenal, nothing against them, but we got a little deeper as time went on. How many of you have actually chosen by choice, said, let me understand where Black rage is coming from?
Let's let the friends in the room.
That question is because understand Black rage is to understand why Black women are tired and need a nap. Because
let's let the friends in the room raise their hands in response to your question. And I'm being mindful of your all's time.
Okay, I'm just going to say
it's getting close to your witching hour.
Thank you. I
9 o'clock, yeah.
Okay.
So friends, raise your hands, in the participant thing. If you've, let's see, we'll get a count here. I may not see everyone. So if you've watched movies about violence on Black people, whether it be slavery, current news, things of that nature. If you've read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeBrew, Abraham Kinde, any of that information, let's get a count and see who's done that kind of thing.
And while she's counting, I'll close with this. Malcolm X said the most unprotected woman in America is the Black woman.
It's a Black woman, that's right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that when we're looking at Black women's abilities to bring about racial healing and how we're uniquely centered to be a part of the conversation, I just want to remind you of why Black women need a nap and why we need you to come along as allies in the process of racial healing and to bring about racial justice. Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, thank you. So we've got over 20 some people raising their hands on that one. And that's part of the reason for this space, is that people come here to be educated, but then not just to learn something, but to go back and do something about it. And that's the mission really of this series. And if you're in this space, we all know we'll probably get to this after you ladies have had to leave, but we have a conversation about what's your takeaway and what are you going to do with it. And that's the conversation that will continue later on if we don't have an opportunity to start it now. So wonderful. I'm glad you asked that question. That was great. Would anyone like to respond to that question? Okay, well, one thing, Joyce, I see you raising a hand there, or did you want to say something, Joyce? Go ahead, Joyce.
Yes, well, first of all, I am just so honored to be listening to these amazing, amazing women, and I am so grateful for your sharing and the sisterhood. One of the thoughts is that until we, as white people, really get that we're one human family, that when Michael Brown of Ferguson was killed, that was my son. And literally, it could have been my son. I have an interracial son. But until we take ownership that this is our one human family, when one is hurt, we all are hurt. I think that's just such a key thing. There's more, but that's good.
Thank you, Joyce. Patricia, I saw your hand up. I'm not sure if it was because you wanted to get in the conversation. Could you let me know, Pat?
Where did I go? Oh,
There you are. We've got you.
I wasn't really trying to get in the conversation. I was just saying I had read books.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Judy and Dean. Go ahead, Judy.
Yeah. It's Judy tonight. I love what was said about people not watching those movies. I'm 74 years old, and so I've been around for a long time. And I've been very upset with people who say that kind of thing. I've had family members who I would come and say, you know, you really ought to see this movie. You really ought to see Selma. I mean, of all things, Selma. And oh no, I can't watch things like that. And it really truly makes me angry, because it's like my poor little soft white heart just can't deal with that. And I find it indefensible, because as you said, they'll watch other movies with violence in them and so on. But if it's real, they don't want to see it. If it's real, and if it's something that makes them feel guilty. So I think these movies, especially recently, so many have come out, are just essential. And those of you who are on here who didn't raise your hand, I really hope you'll change your mind and go see some of these movies.
Well, we're lucky to have such a resource in the form of these films by which we can do self-education about these issues. And I think that if we wanted to give a charge to everyone on the call tonight, we could say, think about the people in your life, whether it's yourself, your family members, or other people you know who haven't dipped into it but would benefit from knowing it. What's a strategy I can use to gradually lead the person towards that? How can I be an agent of education of the people around me? And how can I be an agent of healing and justice in the world around me? And one additional question that I would ask people to consider is, what can I learn about how to make healing and justice in the world from Black women? What do I not know? Where do I go to get that information? Which Black women do I need to read, talk to, see, or listen to learn that, and then go do it? You know, because this conversation was meant to spur people. It was meant to get people thinking. It was meant to provide people with some resources that they could use as a jumping off point. So I think that as a closing charge, because I know my two colleagues need to go, although I can stay for a little bit longer, that, you know, I really want people to come out of this with action steps, because womanism, Black women, we're about action. You know, yes, we are inspired by spirituality and we got all the high principles of religion in the world, but we are about action. The world changes through action. It doesn't change through just thinking about stuff. So, you know, that we give that to you.
Thank you, Layli. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I'll say as my closing point, again, thank you so much for this invitation, for this thoughtful discussion. I was just thinking, you know, there's a pain tree in my neighborhood, and I'm glad, grateful that I have the language for that now. There's just so much that that we all have to learn. I'll say I would recommend A Black Women's History of the United States. A Black Women's, yeah, it's a new kind of collective starting point of gathering, where Tara Hunter's book, To Joy My Freedom, is incredible as a starting point to get a broad sense of that. A Black Women's History of the United States by Diana Rimmerberry and Kali Gross is a great place to start that self-education, to have these, you know, not just the films, but that the rich documented history of where to go next. But this was really fruitful, and I'm very grateful to have been here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I must say, Stephanie, you are a walking encyclopedia. The way you just rattled off those names.
Oh,
and
no, ma'am,
titles.
I have my notes. No.
Oh, you had your notes. Oh, all right. Well,
let's be clear. I have a horrible memory. Don't tell anybody. But I do have some things in my head, but you know, I usually kind of type them out.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, one of the things that we do on the series is we try to capture all the references and resources that are mentioned. So if you would like to share that list, and of course, Nason, one of the things that he does so well, as you all were presenting and talking about your works and so on, he was putting that information in the chat for people. But we go a step further than that. We take that information, and when we send out that notice, it says, this is now available on YouTube for watching. We also include all of that information that you've provided. So if you have that list you'd like to share, or if it's all in your book or whatever, please get me that information and it will go out and be shared with folks. Same, you know, same for you, Sharon. And of course, Layli, you know, knows that as well.
And please go to Stephanie's website, because Stephanie's website has annotated bibliography after annotated bibliography. She is a
goodness.
So
okay,
go to her website.
So that might be all we need from Stephanie is the website. Okay, it's good to be organized. That's wonderful. Okay, friends, we're not closing out, but we are going to say goodbye to Stephanie and Sharon, you know, because their time is limited with us. Again, I can't thank you both enough for coming, and Layli for bringing them along. We've learned a lot, and I know we're going to have a little more conversation, but thank you, ladies, so much. And for those of you that can stay, please stay. We're not done. We can still have conversation.
All right.
Bye, Stephanie. And I would like to say a formal goodbye as well as offer another book source.
Okay.
The other book source I'd like to offer is William Greer, by two psychologists, William Greer and Prince Cobbs, called Black Rage. I'm going to hold that up for you.
Great.
Let me know when you can see it. Maybe there we go.
We got it. Yep.
So for those of you that are wanting to understand more with this Black Lives Matter moment that we're in with the Black Lives Matter movement, Black Rage is a book that I would also recommend that you get. So one is To Joy My Freedom, the other Black Rage. And I would again like to say thank you all for listening, for opening your hearts, opening your ears, for being so welcoming, for being so loving. As Layli said, the charge is forth, go get a movie. I would say start with 12 Years a Slave, because it's real talk. And then I would say, if you don't like to watch movies, pick up one of those books. But before I go, I got to let you know, I love you with everything I have in me. I'm grateful to be in your presence. I intend to be a light. It's intentional. And I hope you go out and be the same. I love my sister Layli. And I want to thank you, Sherilyn, for this opportunity.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
See me again. Bye-bye.
Umbutu. Thank you, Sharon.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, friends. So Layli can stay a little longer with us. Let's see, we got a little activity here in the chat. Nathan has put some more of those references in there.
Yes. I also want to, I see one of my other friends is here and I want to call her up. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
See my friend Eva Brito. Eva, can you make yourself known? Because Eva, I wanted her to be on with us tonight too, but she was making a documentary today and she couldn't get here in time. So I want to say she's also part of this spiritual healing and justice Black Women's Sister Circle network that I'm talking about. And if she wants to say hello about her artistic expression priestess work, she can. If she doesn't want to, that's fine. Maybe I'll bring her back in the future, but I just want to say hi, Eva. I know you're here and I want the world to know about you and what you do.
Oh, thank you so much, Sister Layli. Yes, I am here. My camera's not working, but I'm glad to be here and to hear the conversation. And some of the work I do is infusing the healing arts part of my background is I'm a licensed social worker and an artist in many forms. And like Heather said, I think Black women have been healers, are healers, and continue to heal. And providing spaces in which we can do that is so important. So I'm just glad to be here and listen to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. I know we'll bring you back another time, but you know, this work is important, and there are people out there who are making this their life's work, and Eva is one of them. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So back to you, Charlene. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I need that sign. You're on mute. I was over here talking to myself. Thank you, Eva. Okay, folks, it's us. So what are you taking out of this? What questions do you have? Remember, we said questions are really good because it shows curiosity. It's okay to say, you know, I really don't know what they meant when they were talking about a pain tree and a pain lake. Does everyone know what that meant? No, good. So someone needs to know more about what that means. Great. You know, it's okay. We want to ask questions. We want to enhance our knowledge of things. So what questions do you have? What takeaways do you have that you're going to reflect on or take back or share with others? That's where we go now. Okay, what is a pain tree? Can you answer that, Layli, or we can ask Nikki because she's still here in the room?
If Nikki's still here, I would bring her back up.
Okay, come on back up, Nikki.
I am here, and forgive the bad lighting. I'm actually on vacation in Newport, Rhode Island. So this is terrible lighting in my hotel room.
It's okay.
Yeah, the pain tree, again, it's Afro-Caribbean rooted, and it was a designated space that was spiritually anointed as a space for healing. So it's like having a sacred space, almost like going into a temple or a mosque, or, you know, a place of healing, not just worship, but specifically for healing. And it would be a space that usually a high priestess would anoint either a tree and a ground in a particular area. And people would go there with their nails and rocks to nail in a hammer in a nail. And they would say a prayer while they're putting the nail into the tree. And it was a way to kind of purge themselves of pain. This was during slavery, right? So after slavery, it became more complex as a form of healing, because then they could gather more freely and openly. And they would be able to do so in places called barnyards, where they would have a high priestess and or a queen mother who would oversee the healing for a number of things, from physical ailments to emotional ailments. And it would just be, again, anointed sacred spaces. So in this case, it was actually a physical tree anointed for healing. And then sometimes they would have a lake or a space where someone would go, they'd pray over the rock, they kind of release everything. It's similar to like the Japanese healing ceremony, where they would have a boat, you'd write a note, all the things you want to release, you'd put it on the boat, send it into the water and light it on fire. So it's a comparable healing ceremony that's practiced by Afro-Caribbean women. And it's very much rooted in slavery, and it was how they healed themselves even during slavery. But the high priestess, there was always a high priestess among the population. It's just how religion was done. And they would go in and find a space and anoint it and almost set it up spiritually, and people would know where to go to get healing.
Nice. Thank you so much, Nikki. We have a question. Joyce, you put a question in the chat. You want to go ahead and just go off mute and go for it? And then Carlotta has raised her hand. She's next after you, Joyce.
Hi. Well, the question was, let me just preface it. In 1995, it was my honor to be in China at the UN's Women's Conference, where I gave a workshop called Gathering Ourselves for Women. And so my question was, today, do you sense there is a growing connectedness among women in general, as well as among Black women?
I think that we are in a time of quite painful disconnection right now, because women are as divided as the rest of society on a certain level. But on another level, which is the level of daily lives, women are still doing connecting work. Black women are doing that connecting work. White women are doing that connecting work. They may do it differently based on culture, based on whatever. But the idea is that people are, I think society is in a very hard place right now, a very hard place of polarization and disconnection, which is why the message of unity is so much more essential right now, because those who have ears to hear, let us hear that unity is the way forward for humanity. But I think that we have to acknowledge and be aware of the level of disconnection. And I would say in the same sentence, the level of pain, because I think there's a direct relationship between the pain and the disconnection. So many women and people in general are experiencing the most fundamental kind of pain, whether it's the pain of not having the basic necessities of life, whether it's the pain of having who you are negated day after day, whether it's the pain under living under inescapable violence, whether it's the pain of trying to make do for your family and being unable, whether it's the pain of just, mental health issues, physical health issues. There's so much suffering, and so much of it is not acknowledged in any kind of real connected way. That's so much of why I enjoyed listening to the practices that Nikki was talking about, because they were practices that involved human beings connecting with other human beings and working together to shift negative energy away so that positive energy could re-enter the relationship, the individual, the world, the community. And we got now, everybody's looking at their phone. Everybody's, not even looking at the people at their own dinner table. And, there's just great disconnection. I mean, on some level, we're learning to be connected globally through the internet and those sorts of, I'm not saying it's all negative, but we're in a time where things are unsettled. And we do really have to tune in to what's going on so that we can carefully shape it in a direction that will be good for human beings. Because there's a lot going on right now that isn't good for human beings. And there are a lot of people who are not thinking about what's happening. They're just living in it and experiencing it and suffering. So if we are able to think about how to make things better, we sort of have a responsibility to step into these times and help steer this careening ship of humanity. So that's my answer to your question. I don't know what your answer is, but that's how it appears to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Layli. Carlotta, before I go to you, I'm going to invite Jillian to come on for a minute. And the reason why I'm doing that is because Jillian knows a lot about energy work. And I'd like her, she's done a fantastic session for us earlier. It's on our YouTube channel. But Jillian, if you could take just a few minutes to explain the concept of energy and the relationship, the energetic relationships, just so people, I don't want to assume everyone kind of knows what that's about. You hear energy thrown around. Well, what does that really mean, right? And and I know she knows this. That's why I'm picking on her.
I don't know if I
so
have.
If you could do it, kind of as concisely as you can, just kind of an overview.
I wasn't prepared for this, so I'm sorry.
I know you weren't. I put you on the spot. Totally put you on the
energy
spot.
In terms of healing and stress cycles and trauma, that the connection between people and people are hardwired for connection, right? We are meant to be connected to each other. There's been a lot of damage in our history of the world, based on different components that have really torn apart these connections that are part of who we are. And when we're not in connection with others, there's trauma involved. And when you add those actually abuses on top of it, it confounds the traumas that each individual has. And it was interesting because, when Sharon was talking about watching movies and shows, like Nathan and I were having a hard time watching The Lost Kingdom. I don't know if you guys have seen, it's on Netflix or whatever, and some people love it. But in thinking about how trauma sits in systems and how we end up with this, what's called traumatic retention, which is things that have happened over generations that start to look like culture, but it's actually trauma cycles that we perpetrate on each other. And when I watched, it was about the early time of the Norsemen coming down and the overtaking of stealing land and taking over things and enslaving people, you know, up in that time in the early like 1000s and earlier. And I could see the trauma retention patterns that then manifest later into the development of what came in with colonization, you know, and then the perpetration of that damage that goes on to like what we did to the indigenous coming into this country or enslaved people, and how that builds into the systems that we have built today. That sits within all of our systems. That traumatic retention sits within it and kind of causes a disconnection between our relationships. This is my understanding anyways. I mean, I'm sure there's so much more to this, and I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining it, but
no, you are.
Dr. Resmaa Menakem has great, his book, My Grandmother's Hands, discusses a lot of this. And I think that this womanism and this connection to Black women is so imperative, because it's part of that bigger picture of healing process of what has been not centered, needing to be centered for our healing, for us to shift that energy forward, you know, to build these connections, to really like, and there has to be, and there's individual healing, and then there's community healing, communal healing that needs to take place. So the things that were brought up today to me are so imperative, that Nikki was talking about and all that, because you need that communal healing space. And then how white people need to do their healing too, you know, to open up that, to like shift that energy forward, to be able to connect those things, so that we can actually build a unified community that's very real and deep, and not just lip service, like, and actually change our systems on a very real level. I don't know if that's what you're asking for. I don't know if that was.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'd like to just add a little bit to that, which is that part of what needs to happen, both individually and culturally, is we need to turn our sensors back on, you know, because we have been socialized to turn off our energy sensors about other people so that we can objectify people. Because if you're feeling the feelings, you can't objectify people. And so much of the whole colonial process and all of these things has been about the objectification of human beings, even sexism, whatever. It's all about the objectification of people. And you can't objectify people if you are in tune with them energetically, if your sensors are on and you're aware. You know, I used to teach my class, when I was teaching my class about energy, I would say, you know, if you were to walk into a room full of people with your eyes closed, you would be able to tell who was hot, who was cold, who was fearful, who was angry, who was happy. You can feel all that. You're not used to paying attention to it, but you can do it. We have the sensors, we have the ability. If we tune into that and then we make it important, then we behave differently towards each other and we set situations up differently. You know, we've decided that it's appropriate in certain relationships, for example, a mother and baby, to have the sensors on, but we think in other situations like, you know, commerce or whatever, we should have the sensors off, or in the military or whatever. You know, it's like, we need to turn the sensors back on, and then we have an ethical responsibility to what our sensors detect to make sure our connections are good and healthy, and that is healing and justice work.
Yeah, and another aspect of this that Nikki's comments have brought to mind in terms of healing and why nature, why the trees, why the nails, you know, why the rocks, what do these things represent? And we know from a Baha'i perspective that we have these various kingdoms, right? You know, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and they each have their own essence. And so when we have this painful energy that we want to get rid of, we look to something else to help transfer that out of us, okay, and put it back into the larger energy, where we know that the motive force of the universe is love. And so whatever that pain is, it's going to come out, you know, maybe assisted through a vehicle, you know, like a nail in the tree, and then back into the ethos, right? Where it's reconfigured back into love, because that really is the motive force. That's what holds the universe together. Scientists are actually getting to that point, you know.
And even with, you know, we're breathing out
Yeah.
what they breathe in, and they're breathing out what they breathe in. And there's that cycle of connection. Just by being near each other, we're contributing to one another's life force.
Yes, yes. Okay, we have a couple of hands up now. Carlotta, and then
Gosh,
Carlotta.
I should let
Okay.
others go because I've spoken.
Okay, thank you so much, Carlotta. Thank you so much. So let me see here. Let me get the order here. Who was up next? So it'd be Colette and then Nikki. Colette?
Yeah, thanks. So much has been going through my mind in the last couple of minutes. A lot of the work I did in my professional life was as a psychodramatist and working with empowerment and healing from trauma and using the arts as a means of connecting. And in my own life, in my own recovery and awareness process, there was a long time where I didn't have language to express my feelings. I had disconnected from the words, from the emotions. And what helped me and what has helped the people I worked with over the years was music and drumming and using the lyrics of a lot of songs as a means of finding my voice again and helping others find their voice and finding words to express those feelings that had been blocked for so long. Two real quick examples that are connected. But in my training as a psychodramatist, I was working in, or we were training in Black Earth, Wisconsin, which is outside of Madison. And the property was a massacred Native American village that had, and we built a theater of protection on the land where we had our psychodrama training and people came from all over the world. And whenever we had a real intense trauma drama, we would often have an eagle circle overhead over the property. And part of what I would do as the designated firekeeper, I would arrive a day early and I would walk the land and I would create a sacred fire that we kept burning throughout the entire time that we would have these workshops, so that there was a focal point where people could come and bring their pain and put it in the fire. So all of this is really resonating with me. And part of my work was also took me to South Africa. And I went there with 5 white therapists in our team. And we were working in the townships in Ebony Park Township outside of Johannesburg. And the first day, as we were creating this healing circle, we divided up into groups, and I said to my group, what is our song? And I don't remember it, it was over 20 years ago, but the women in that group started a chant in Zulu. And as other groups came up that were being led by the other therapists in our group, they would add to the moving sculpture of people and they would bring a new song in. And so we've ended up with 6 different songs in different African languages, but that created this whole, and my white therapist friends and colleagues were in tears. They had never experienced anything like that. And that's when I really, truly understood the power of music and the arts as part of this journey. So, thanks.
Those are great stories about the importance of the arts and the expressive arts, and specifically about that spirituality, healing, justice connection. I mean, they are a different language. They awaken different parts of our beingness, and they're essential to our full humanity, our healing, and to justice work. So those were, I very appreciate those stories, Colette.
Real quick, I just was sent the other day a new CD that's available on whatever it is, but it's a lot of Baha'i songs in Swahili.
Hmm.
And it's just an amazing collection, including Red Grammar's Listen and a couple of others. So, you know, it went right into my soul in a way that I think I'm going to have to share with other people.
Yeah, put it in the chat if you can put the or some information.
I will look for it.
Thank you.
Okay, or you can always email me later with it. You know, it'll be a few days before I turn this around. Nikki, thank you for waiting.
No worries. Thank you. I just want to, a woman earlier said that all human beings are connected. And I think it's something we take for granted. One of my closest friends, she is white, she's of Irish heritage, and we are doing the work. We've been really close friends for the last 2 years. She came to one of my meetings and asked if I'd be willing to have lunch with her, just a lunch meeting. And we've been connecting and doing the hard work. She's an unbelievably just amazing ally who is willing to kind of face the ugly history so we can move forward. And we're doing that as sisters. She is my sister, and that is what I call her. Even when I'm here, hi sister, I'm in Newport, I'm safe. You know, we do the sister check-ins. But so I would encourage, especially the allies that are on this, is to build the connections, reach out to Black women in your communities, in your jobs, in your social circles, and make that connection and do the work, because Black trauma injures white people also. I put that in the chat because it caused you to be isolated and disconnected from the rest of humanity. And my friend who is white says to me, she felt like something was just missing in her life that she didn't know she needed, that she found when we became friends. She just couldn't put her finger on it. She said, I was sad. Something was always missing. It doesn't matter how successful she was professionally. She's married, she has children, but that sense of missingness, for lack of a better word, right? I'm making up a word, right? That's in your lives, especially as white people. And you feel like it feels intangible, but you could feel the loss, right? And it's that you're lost. The loss is from your connection to the rest of humanity. So I'm going to challenge you to reach out to other people and to invite them out to lunch and do the work so we can rejoin our human family, right? We know how it got this way. It's a very ugly history, but it doesn't have to stay that way. So I'm just encouraging you to be brave and make that step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Yes, that's what we're all about. Absolutely. You're in the right room. Okay, Eva, and then Jillian, and then Jean. Eva?
Yes. I wanted to piggyback on what Colette said about being creative in arts and psychodrama. I think when we're speaking about healing, we so often sometimes separate the art to this different space, and we are all creative beings and come from a creator. So that's innate in us. And I think in our society, we've put art to be in a space that if you're an artist, if you write, or if you dance, you're an artist, if you're not. But that's so innate in our history and as African Indigenous people, that's who we are. We don't need permission to sing. I love it when we're in space and I hear women humming or, movement. We are moved by spirit and we dance. So I think that's an example of our healing in our spaces that we own. And sometimes society says, no, that you have to fit a box. So I just she made me think about how that is part of our spiritual healing that comes innate within us. And share that.
Yeah. So thank you.
And that's a principle too that's very emphasized in the Baha'i educational process, that arts have to be integrated for everyone, not just for artists, So I love what you're saying.
Yeah, there's, and Iva, you reminded me of a woman. I go into the Dollar Tree a couple of times a month, and there's an older Black woman that works there, and you can tell she's in a lot of pain. She's got arm braces. She's, she has her wheelchair, and she works the register. Every time I go in there, she's humming something. And you just love, I could just stand there, and just listen to her. I love it, because she just has that spirit. We were talking about the joy earlier, right? She just has this joy, regardless of her circumstance. she just has this joy in the spirit that she carries with her throughout her day. And she's such a good example for me. Jillian and then Jean.
Yeah, I was just thinking about some of the things that both Layli said and one of the, and actually that everyone has spoken to since earlier, in that what you were talking about with energy. And like, I was thinking about the nervous system, you know, that's within our body systems, and how that's really one of the ways that we read our reality, you know, our safety, and also our ability to be in community with others. Because a lot of times we're nervous system meeting nervous system, you know, like in terms of if you feel connected or safe with someone. And when Layli was talking about someone breathes out and someone breathes in, I was like, even if you have that balanced nervous system with another person, you come into connection. And one of the things that moves that energy through your body systems when there's trauma involved is that music, is that drumming, is that dancing, is that all of that. It's the events themselves that are traumatic aren't necessarily what traumatizes. It's the what happens to that energy within your body system after that traumatic event happens. So if you're able to move that energy through back into homeostasis, the trauma doesn't sit in your system in the same way. So that you can actually move through your day in a more healed space, minute to minute or hour to hour. So really connecting with the body system, you know, which I'm sure many people on this call know from the healing, from the yoga, from many different breath types. There's so many ways to do so, and in community with each other, because we're relational people. So you have, it's kind of like you need all those connections. The other thing I was thinking that Nikki was talking about, you know, the missing thing in many white people's thing, that's their trauma. That's their, what they've brought with them when whiteness was formed, when this history has come, that disconnect and dehumanizing of others shuts off our own humanity to a point. You know, at least this is my perspective at this point. So you lose this connection with like my own ancestors. Like, do I want to connect with my ancestors who committed atrocities? Like, I have a healing aspect of that I have to deal with. And then what does that mean for me now? And how do I connect with others now with that background of history in my ancestry? And then what does that mean? Like, how do I shift that so I can become a connecting person with others who are in community together for the healing process as a whole? So those were the things that kind of came forward, but thank you so much.
Yeah, great additions, thank you. You're on mute, Charlotte.
Jean and then Shukufe.
Gathering, this is Jane, and this gathering is making me so happy. First time I've been with a whole bunch of African-American women and been able to learn from them and have suggestions from them and know all of you, so thank you so much. I just wanted to share something this morning. I was on the chat with Barbara Kelly, and this wonderful African-American Native artist, and her native name is Red Holy Woman. And if anybody was on, you saw her beautiful art and the things she had to say. But there was one profound statement that she made that it just stopped me in my tracks. And it's a wonderful way to explain the unity of mankind. And what she said was, we are not different races. We are different colors. We are one race. And I just thought that was profound, and I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing it, Jean.
Yeah.
Shukufe.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, actually, I didn't raise my hand. I was clapping for what Jillian said. But I appreciate your calling. But what she said about the interconnectedness of all of us, it really, and how one of the reasons that probably the white are afraid, of watching those movies or even thinking about atrocities that, had happened to the slaves, is because, you're ashamed. And again, it talks about the interconnectedness of all of us, that we are ashamed of what we did. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call on some of the men now. It's really great to see so many men in this space on a talk about women. So first, let's just say that about you guys. Welcome, welcome. So glad that you are here. But we'd like to hear from some of you. What are your questions? What ahas did you have? Anything. So if someone doesn't step up, I'm going to pick on somebody. Come on, Mano Share. I see you. You're leaning in.
Well, just because I'm leaning in doesn't mean that I have anything to offer. It's wonderful to be back. I have not been able to participate in these wonderful firesides lately. But of course, what can I say about the station of women? Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha have spoken. And in some of the writings that I have seen lately, and that's not in English yet, the way Abdul Baha talks about women is really telling them that, hey, you have not been let to rise to your potentials, but you are above men, and you are to show that as you teach, as you work, as you expand your expertise. And of course, we all know how Abdul Baha talks about how so much wonderful, beautiful qualities, spiritual qualities women have versus what we men have to offer. Anyhow, I hadn't thought of being called upon, but here we are. It's good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you too. And it's wonderful to hear that. For those of you that may not know, the original texts of the Baha'i writings are in Persian or Arabic, and they're translated into English and every other language in the world. So that's what Manashir was referring to, something that we don't have in English just yet. Okay, Ormond, you know I'm coming for you, Ormond. What have you got to say about tonight?
This has been wonderful once again, and it's been a while since I've been here in the on the scene, I'll say. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Layli, once again. You bring so much. You bring love, you bring wisdom, you bring your spirit, you bring your expertise in the field of certainly talking about women, but about Africanity. I'm still hooked on Africanity. I got to share that. You also kind of made me think back to my early days, my childhood. I come from a large family of 7 siblings, and we grew up in like my early years in a 2-bedroom house with, sharing that with 5 brothers and no, I'm sorry, let me get my math right, 6 brothers and sisters. And so, that being said, it made me reminisce about the times where, my mother would be feeding, this large family of children. And we all had friends, we had, our friends lived down the street who whose mother may not have come in from the night before, or their parents missing, all kinds of situations. And there may have been, some days, 10, 11, 12 kids at our dinner table, And so it just made me think about the resiliency of my mother, and other Black women that I've seen, move in those kinds of circumstances, And so I'm thinking about the resiliency of Black women, and how it seems as though there obviously is a correlation of folks that struggle. We come out of these dire circumstances, and to see our women again throughout the annals of history go through all kinds of adversity, and to overcome those difficult times. Could you just touch a little bit on that, about how when I say we, our women overcome the adversity that historically has been at their doorstep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because the first thing that comes into my mind is that analogy about how, only through extreme pressure does coal turn into a diamond, and so there is a kind of piece of spiritual process in play there. But at the same time, I think you have to look at it through a dual lens, because one lens is that Black women are showing resilience and not only getting through it themselves and helping everybody else get through it, but the flip side of that is Black women are also suffering and need to be relieved of that suffering. And then we have to look at both sides at once. It's not either or, both things are going on. And that gets into that earlier part of conversation that we were having about sometimes women got to say no, sometimes women got to take a nap, sometimes, whatever, you have to do the self-care that keeps you able to care for others. It's like a cycle. It's always, both things need to go on. And if you're in a point where you can't do that, then eventually you lose your ability to be there for other people, and so we love to lift up the so-called superwoman, but at the same time, without taking any glory away from that, we also have to recognize that sometimes that is a way to gloss over forms of violence, exploitation, or just pure taking people for granted that we need to question in our pursuit of justice. Because injustice, in a just situation, the burdens of life are shared relatively equally, and historically, societies of the world have had a tendency to stockpile, the most drudgery kind of tasks with certain sets of people and relieve other people of them. And we have to question, is that really how we want the world to be set up? Is that really how the world should be set up? Is that really a just arrangement? Is that really the standard that Baha'u'llah is calling us to? Those are big questions that we need to ask.
Yes.
Nobody wants to ask what's Baha'u'llah's stance on who cleans the toilet, but those are justice questions, because those are the daily life. That woman that's doing that, she could be writing a book, she could be singing a song, she could be running for president, but instead, and so we have to ask those questions, and one of the things that I wanted to say in response to the previous comment was that, we are lucky to have the Baha'i faith as a revelation in which the equality of women and men has been unequivocally proclaimed.
That's right.
And now it is up to us to live up to it and to fully understand it and to really explore what are the capabilities of people of all genders and how do we bring them into their fullness and into just relationships in the human collective. That's our work, our job, our adventure, quite frankly. And so everything that I do, whether it's related to Blackness or whether it's related to gender or whatever, is all in service of like, how can we explore into this great invitation from Baha'u'llah to bring these things into being, because this is the time early in the life of this community and early in humanity's walk with this explicit principle. How can we really bring it to its fullest realization? We're all in it together. Yes. So thank you for that question. I appreciate it, Armand.
Thank you.
That's really, really deep and thought-provoking. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, where would we see that quest for justice on a gender basis, let's say, start? And do we see it in marriages? Right? Ormond, you can go home tonight. And you could talk to your wife about this. Am I helping you out? Am I giving you that nap you need? I know Armand real well, so I'm picking on him because I know he won't, be taken
I got to
back
scrub
by
some basement floors tomorrow morning, so.
That's right. You got to do more than take the car to the car wash, okay? But that's one level to look at it, right? And then in the context of our community lives, right? Who's doing all the work in the Baha'i communities, or whatever your faith community or affinity community is? Who's out there moving and shaking things? I think you can pick any affinity group, and it's going to be the women. It's always the women. But that kind of harks back to what Memoirs was saying. That women, we do have this capacity to make a way out of no way, as Layli put it earlier. But at the same time, again, as she was saying, we can't give. We have to do self-care. So on the one hand, women are in fact saying no, like Simone Biles, and others. We are saying no, right? But when we say no, we're also saying yes to ourselves, to that self-care. So there is what seems like a duality, but it really is a oneness, I think, that happens.
I mean, we can really ask ourselves, particularly if we're taking it from a Baha'i framework, with every task that we engage in, what is the role of this task in making justice in the world and realizing Baha'u'llah's standard of justice? And how does this task need to be worked out to realize justice? Just a question we can ask. Just starting with a question will open up new vistas.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead, Memoirs.
Yeah, I was just looking at that tablet, and I don't have the provisional translation of it. It's not translated. There is no authorized translation, nor provisional, but we are developing that. Hopefully by next time I will have provisional translation of that to share with you of how Abdul Baha in this tablet that was sent to some 70 women in the village where I was born and I was raised, speaks to them.
Wow.
And basically it says that in the past dispensations, women were not called to the occasion, but now they are. And they are superior to men, and they are to show that in their ways of life, in their teaching, and so on. So here you are, all wonderful women on the street.
Thank you, Memoirs. I'm going to make a comparison, if you will, and see how this flies. And I'm extrapolating from what I've heard today and what I know. And it seems to me that there are two things in the Baha'i revelation that are so radical and so wonderful. And one is that men are called upon to support women quality of women, that's a principle of our faith. We know that. But what Manisher is taking it it's taking it deeper, right? And likewise, in our faith, people of African descent have been likened to the pupil of the eye for our ability to see the light. This is some of what Nikki was talking about, for example. And in that context, it's been extrapolated. So if we use the metaphor of the eye, the pupils in the center, what supports the center? It is the white. And again, this is just extrapolation, take it, for what you will, but we have white supporting Black, the strengths of the Black, centering the Black people. Likewise, men supporting and strengthening the contributions of women. So for what it's worth. Carlotta.
I was just saying that when women don't say no, is it we go crazy? I was, or we don't necessarily go crazy, but we're seen as crazy and put into crazy situations. I was sort of thinking about Malcolm X's mother after her husband was killed. And I was thinking about some women in my community when I was growing up and young, and I saw how they behaved, and they, they stayed within their families, but they didn't seem to have it all together. There's that other side, but I put a number of things in the chat because this is really an important conversation, and I guess it posed a lot of questions for me that I don't think we're going to even be able to answer here. All right, so I'm hoping that this can go further. I mean, a lot of things that were said, just like we're getting at all the issues. I hope people relate to the one humanity, because I was beginning to wonder. I even didn't want to watch The Color Purple, and neither did my husband when it first came out. We didn't want to confront that for some reason. And then later, in life, I watched it. And so I put in the question, what causes us not to be willing to witness another's trauma? And I've paid attention that humans have been inhuman to human beings all over the world under various cultural, historical, spiritual, et cetera, situations. We, the human being, have been inhuman to other human beings. And I don't know where, and if I go back to the human genome, and I know that we're, so far, they're saying one human race on this earth, if they say we've come from outer space at some point, okay. But right now, they did that 15-year study, scientists, both American and international, and they documented that we're exactly genetically the same, more than 99 cents out of a dollar, but there's no 100% of any one of us other than ourselves. So to me, that says we each have a contribution to make to humanity that nobody else can. And I keep saying my answer to reparations when they talk about that word is there's got to be a baseline about being a human being that we all recognize, and that every one of us needs to be shored up somewhere on that baseline, every one of us, and every one of us can help another be shored up. So
Carlotta, Carlotta, let me, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's all right.
But we're gonna have to go in just a minute. But I want to give people a chance to respond, to what you just said, because you raised a really important question. And I'll respond very quickly and then see if anyone else does. Where we are in the development of humanity is that we are in fact learning. Number one, as you've rightly pointed, that we have not been very human or very spiritual, let's say, to one another. And that is part of the Baha'i revelation, to take us to becoming, to seeing the God in each of us and to treating each other that way. So we're on that journey. Layli, did you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that humanity is very much evolving in response to the impulses that are really released by the divine educators. And when we think about what will become possible for humanity to be like once we hit the threshold of unity, it's almost unimaginable. When I think back into, let's say, evolutionary biology, when the life forms were just a bunch of unicellular organisms swimming around in the soup, eventually they had to unify into some kind of multicellular thing. And then that thing evolved into what we are today. We can't imagine how we're going to evolve once we realize unity. We're just like the little, single cell organisms swimming around right now. We're starting to notice each other. But Baha'u'llah is asking us to really come together and form that new kind of being, which is really represented by our finding unity. And sometimes I just lie on my bed and try to imagine, 1,000 years from now or 500,000 years from now. It's almost unimaginable who we can become. So, all these things that we think of as differences now, they're important in the sense that unity and diversity is important, but they're also unimportant because there are so many forms of identity and beingness ahead of us that we can't even imagine that if we just keep putting one foot in front of each other, we'll get there. So it's exciting. It's wonderful to be part of this.
Thank you, Layli. Well, Layli has to leave, and we thank you so much for the generosity of your time and your knowledge and just
always
everything you've brought to this space. And I hope you'll come back again.
Well, thank you for holding this space. I mean, you're really doing the heavy lifting week after week, having these wonderful talks. So thank you for including me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to make one more announcement, and then I'd like to invite someone who might like to share a closing prayer for us. And my announcement is twofold. September 11th is our next presentation with Jeffrey Ewing on the importance of being earnest. And that's going to be a conversation with him. So we're really looking forward to that. More will be out shortly. And again, if you're not on our subscriber list, please put your email address and city and state in the chat. You can send it directly to me. And or to everyone if you want everyone to reach you too. And we would love to have you on our list. So thank you very much. Would anyone like to do a closing prayer? I'm going to call on Ormond if no one steps up, because I know he's got music in his back pocket. Go ahead, Ormond.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. The kingdoms of earth and heaven are thine, O Lord of the worlds, O Lord of the worlds. The kingdoms of earth and heaven are thine, O Lord of the worlds, O Lord of the worlds. Is there any remover of difficulties? Save God. Say praise be God. He is God. Is there any remover of difficulties? Save God. Say praise be God. He is God. Please thank you.
Thank you so much, Ormond. It was wonderful. He's always got that drum. Yes, we love it. We love it. Good night, friends. Have a great week. And we'll see you in 2 more weeks. Thank you again, Layli. And thank you, friends, for joining us.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. We love you.
Thank you, Nason, Jillian. Also, thank you, Sherilyn. Thank you, all.
Ormond.
Wow,
Thank you,
love
Layli.
you guys.
Night, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Manasher,
Great seeing
Diane
you.
Abram,
so
Hazel,
much. I
Cynthia
enjoyed it.
Phillips made it in, Roya, Verdina, Alice. Thank you, Wanjuku. Hey, girl, there you are. Thank you for coming. Hey, Douglas, there you are.
Hi.
Mary,
Thank you
oh,
so
Mary,
much.
there's
Hi,
Mary and
how are
Dennis.
you?
Hey, good to see you.
Shirley.
Hi.
Dennis put his information in the chat for you so he can
Oh,
get
okay.
the notifications.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. That's great. That's great. Carla, good to see you. Catherine, thank you. Catherine's one of our founding members. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Bye.